Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. We're here to talk about our parks system. My name is Ann Ober. I'm the city manager for the city of Milwaukie. And the mayor, I think, is on his way, but we have the rest of council here tonight. We're going to be answering questions. The majority of tonight is actually about answering questions, but we'll start with a couple of PowerPoints just to set the table a bit. And then we will break into a Q&A with Peter Passarelli, our Public Works Director, and with our City Council. This meeting is being conducted in person. You in the room know that. At the Learning Library and by video conference. The public may participate in this meeting by coming to the library or joining the Zoom webinar. The meeting is being recorded and will be broadcast through the city's YouTube channel and Comcast Channel 30 if you have people who would like to watch. There will be opportunities for the public to speak during the meeting. If you would like to address council or Peter or myself, you may come to the library or raise your hand on Zoom. If you do decide to come down to the library, our seating's getting a little limited, so just know that you may not be able to get a seat. If you're in the room and interested in giving comment or asking questions, we do have a microphone. We're just going to ask that people line up at the microphone so that we are able to capture all of the content from tonight. And then I just wanted to take a brief moment to acknowledge that the city of Milwaukie acknowledges that our community is located on the ancestral homeland of the Clackamas people. In 1855, the surviving members of the Clackamas signed the Willamette Valley Treaty, also known as the Kalapuya, etc. Treaty, with the federal government in good faith. We offer our respect and gratitude to the indigenous people of this land, and I think it's really appropriate for us. We talked about whether or not we wanted to read this tonight at the start because it's not a typical council meeting, but I think it's really important as we're talking about our lands, these shared lands that we take sometimes for granted. And remember that they are a critical part of our infrastructure as a person, as a human, as a community, and we are deeply grateful to the Clackamas tribe for their investment here and continued investment here in our community. With that, I wanted to just lay the groundwork a little bit for tonight so that everyone has the same information. So the city has been hosting a series of conversations over the last few months to discuss the design of 3 parks here in the city: Balfour, Bowman, Bray, and Scott Park. Though critical, we will not be discussing these tonight, so I just wanted to let everyone know if you are interested in talking about those 3 parks, we're having a community meeting online on November 16th. Adam also came and set up outside. He's happy to sit down and talk to anyone who'd like to talk about specific designs for those parks. What we're talking about here tonight is about providing general park services and recreation services. So this is about a broader conversation for the city. A little bit about why we're talking about it. For a very long time, the city ran its own Parks and Recreation Department. Back in the 90s, the city helped create the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District, NCPRD, and has received services through that district since. What the city has discovered over the past couple of years is that the current structure is making it difficult to provide the needed services as the community expands. So to build new parks and to build on the parks that we already have. Tonight, Council President Heisey is going to present some information to discuss, about the why for the council. I think it's pretty representative of the whole council. So though she's the spokesperson, that's why everyone's here, is to answer questions. But this has been a discussion for the whole council. And then we're going to follow that up with Peter Passarelli talking a little bit about what we're doing behind the scenes just to try and figure out if we were to provide a service, what that would look like, and answer what that process would look like for all of you. So with that, I'm actually going to turn this over to Council President Heisey and give her the floor.
Thank you all for being here. I'm Kathy Heisey. I'm your City Council President. I do know that Councilor Nicodemus has an important engagement, so he may be running off before we get to the Q&A period. We're trying not to glare at him too much, but he may or may not be going to see Lizzo. I had to give him a hard time. It's really nice to see all of you here. I honestly have been wondering how much turnout we'd get tonight, so I'm glad that we have this opportunity. Before I launch into this, I'm just curious, how many of you have seen this presentation before about parks? Just 3, okay, yeah. Okay, great. It's good to know. So I'm going to try and move through this pretty quickly. I can talk really fast, so if I start speeding up too much, I have given this a number of times, and I may not be listening to myself, so please just flag me down. Tell me to slow down a little. So I wanted to start us off by just giving a little context. City Council, we tend to accomplish the big work of the city by setting goals, and we typically have enough room in our budget and in just staff capacity for 3 different goals. And for the past 5 years, we've had 6 years, we've had climate change and resilience as one of our goals. We added equity, justice, and inclusion, replacing community engagement about 2 years ago after the murder of George Floyd, and we heard very clearly from the community that they wanted to that we wanted to do some real deep dive on these sorts of equity issues in the community. And for a while, we had just 2 goals. And then in August, I think, it was maybe September, we added a 3rd goal, which was improving Milwaukee's park system and services. And we added that goal almost in reaction to work that we had already been doing both as council and as staff for some time. The past several years, we've been engaged in some pretty deep conversations with the county commission and have gone to their meetings to testify. And what we've realized in the past couple of months is that a lot of that conversation has been taking place more or less outside of the view of our community. So we wanted to highlight that this is work that we've been doing and really make a conscious effort to bring you all into that conversation by setting it as a goal and highlighting that this is a place where we're putting our time and efforts. And we did that because, as our city manager already highlighted, we're feeling like it's not working as well as maybe it needs to. And so we want to talk to you about that and get some feedback from you on whether or not you feel like it's that way. So I'm going to try and tell the story of how we got to that point. So when we added this goal about parks, we realized that it also helps us accomplish our climate change and equity goals. And it does this in a bunch of different ways. I can jump to the next slide. This is a new slide. So when we're talking about climate change and just preparing for the warming world we all know we're living in at this point, parks are crucial as sort of these islands of green space where it's cool, it's pleasant, you're getting some air cleaning, you're getting the opportunity to absorb stormwater runoff, which increases as we have more severe storms. We've already seen those. It also absorbs carbon dioxide output from the trees and the shrubbery and everything. And then we also have all of these connections between our trails and greenways and our more active transportation options. I don't know if you all saw in the Clackamas Review recently, I think it was just this last edition, there was an opinion piece in there by Councilor Nicodemus talking about how his family loves to go bike riding through the community and that they see families doing that all the time as well. So this is really a part of how our community functions is by enjoying our parks. And we also know that it quite literally leads to people being more active. You bike to the parks, you spend time in the parks. Just having a park to go to increases our physical activity. And I don't know about you, but I certainly did a lot of sitting around during the pandemic, and I'm coming out of that, hopefully. And our parks were where I went to get some exercise, particularly in those early days of the pandemic when the national forests were closed, we were really limited, and we were really afraid to go places. So that's a really valuable feature as we're all just trying to be healthier as we live our lives. And then we also know that parks are our living rooms. We have terrific community events that happen in our parks, from the concerts that we have in the parks to just winter solstice. I can go on. We have a long list of things we do in our parks. And again, during the pandemic and otherwise, think about the number of times that you or your family members, your kids, have made connections by being at the parks and just getting to know people in those spaces over time. So that is a really terrific benefit. That's more of a social benefit that we don't necessarily think about with parks. It's also a place where we see some real potential for equity work. I want to highlight that in talking about the 3 parks that we as a city are building out right now, thanks to Representative Power and Senator Taylor's investments in Milwaukee. We're having really good conversations with our BIPOC community members. And in the focus group we had there, we learned that something as simple as signage that says, this is a welcoming space for everyone, can make a big difference in making a space welcoming and comfortable for our communities of color in Milwaukee. And that's something we can't do right now because our parks are managed by NCPRD. So that's just a small example of one of the ways we see some equity issues coming up. The other way is just in having greater control over our management of our parks and how they're designed means that we can incorporate the feedback and really understand what the needs are of our historically marginalized communities, from ADA access all the way down the list. So that's a piece that we really think is valuable as well. Next slide. So those are our goals. But as you've already heard, while we've been a member of NCPRD since 1990, we were one of the founding members of this Parks District. And we have this funding that is created by all of the property owners in North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District. Everyone pays into that. And we have this problem that we get to, where that money is controlled by the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners. They wear 2 hats. They serve as the board for NCPRD, in addition to being the board for the whole county. Even though the parks only serve a relatively small part of the county, there's only 1 county commissioner who even lives in NCPRD's territory. So they've got a lot on their plate, and parks haven't really risen to the top of their priorities. And even though we have no Parks and Recreation Department, no ongoing parks budget, and no maintenance budget, we're still building 3 parks right now. And we still actually do a significant amount of grounds maintenance work throughout the city today. So I just want to talk about a little more about what we've managed to do despite the fact that we don't have any of those things. We don't have the Parks Department. We don't really have dedicated staff. We have managed to still build out or do the design work, in many cases, both of those, on all of these different local parks. Balfour, Bowman, Bray, and Scott are the 3 that are currently on the boards out there and under development. Homewood, Ball Michelle, Spring Park, Milwaukie Bay Park, Kronberg Park. If Gary Klein were here, he could go into great detail about how much work the community put into building Milwaukie Bay Park's first 2 phases. That was all work that the city and the community did. The award-winning path in Kronberg Park, that was all built and designed, and the grants were secured by city staff. And that provides absolutely vital access to the south end of town. And it's beautiful. So we can do these things, and we can do them really well when we do them. So when we put those 2 things together, the strain we're having in our relationship with the county and getting things done, and the fact that we know we can do these things well, it makes us wonder if this is the right setup that we've got right now. And we know that it sounds like a big deal, and I don't mean to paint over the fact of how much work it would be to set up a Parks Department. It is a lot of work, and you'll hear more from Peter after I'm done talking at you about what that might look like. So it is not an insignificant undertaking, but we also know that we know our community. We know that you can come to a council meeting and tell us about parks. You can call our Public Works Director and talk to them directly. We love NCPRD's staff. They have been wonderful to work with. They are responsive. The design work that has gone into Milwaukie Bay Park has been terrific. The package of funding that they put together for that, wonderful. None of this is about NCPRD's staff, but it is about the structure of the connection between Milwaukee and our parks. And right now, you have to figure out who it is you call at NCPRD with the question you have or the concern you have. They have to take it to their supervisor. Their supervisor has to figure out how it goes through the funding, and it goes maybe eventually to the Board of County Commissioners. It's a much more complicated path, and we think that this might serve our community better. Red tape. We want to be able to really have the more in-depth conversations. I've loved learning more from our community about what we actually need in our parks by participating in the design process for those 3 parks. It's been really fun, and it's taught me not just about parks, but about the overall needs of this community, and that's really invaluable feedback. And I think that there's also something to be said for bringing that work into all of the work that our city is doing. It just informs so much. And I think that's a joy-building exercise. People get excited and it's fun to talk about parks. There's a lot of stuff we do in the city that isn't fun. And there's something uniquely community building about talking about playgrounds and looking at a space together and dreaming and imagining. And I think that's really exciting and necessary after 2.5 years of a pandemic when we've been so isolated. We know that we're really good at landing grants. We know that when we put money from our general budget into something, we're good at making that money turn into so much more money. We leverage those dollars through grants. We're very successful at applying for grants. And we just kind of are very good at making things work. And when you look at how NCPRD has been struggling to complete projects like Milwaukie Bay Park, which has really turned into a political football. Even though the funding package is put together, it is something that just keeps hitting delay after delay with the county commission. The last one was a 90-day delay. You all know that we are experiencing inflation. It got a little better this month, but we're still in the middle of an inflationary period. Costs on that project have skyrocketed. It was originally supposed to be started in 2020. So we are 2 years after that project was supposed to start. It was a $9 million project to begin with. I don't know what it is now. And certainly we aren't going to be able to build the original version for $9 million at this point. So there will have to be redesign costs, cuts, all of those things. So that's the overview. What happens next? We're doing public engagement right now. We are talking to you all. This is not a decision that we've made. We do want your input. We are looking at how we might pay for it in the future. And when we've thought about this, and again, Peter will answer this to some greater degree in just a minute here, we asked the question, can we do this at the level that we currently have property owners paying? And it sounds like the answer is yes. We probably can't do it that way forever, but Peter was able to come up with a budget that shows that we can maintain our current parks maintenance and operations at its current level or better, and start chipping away at the $940,000 deferred maintenance problem that we have from NCPRD. We have a lot of picnic tables and playground equipment and other resources that are just really past the point of needing replacement that NCPRD has not gotten to. And those are starting to become, at least I am concerned about safety hazards and some of those things. So in addition to being able to pay for it at our current rate of 54 cents on the 1,000, which is what you pay as a property owner annually for your parks, basically, instead of paying that money to NCPRD, what we would be asking everyone to do in a levy would be to instead pay that 54 cents per 1,000 to the city to do the park's maintenance and operation work. I think that was it. Apparently it was it. Ann thinks it was it.
And with that, we're actually going to turn it over to Peter just to talk some about the process staff's been going through.
Thank you, Ann. I'm Peter Passarelli. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Milwaukee. And this evening, I'm going to be talking to you about our operations and maintenance framework for parks, some of the planning and some of the financial considerations that we're looking for. I will share it's sort of been an iterative process. As we've gone along since May, we started off with an initial set of assumptions on how we thought things were going to work out. And as things have progressed over the last 5 to 6 months, we've learned little bits of information, additional information, and determined that where we have gaps that we need to find out more information on and do some additional analysis and evaluations. One of the things as we started down this path of looking at parks and our initial discussions that we've had, we were thinking that we would be focused on sort of maintaining our neighborhood parks in Milwaukie Bay Park and really sort of stay out of the business of a lot of the programming and services piece of parks. That's one of the things that as we've gone through this process that we've learned that we're going to have to get involved, a little bit more involved in that. So we're working with some consultants to help us develop what that's going to look like. But as we looked at the park structure, we sort of set on an initial structure for that operations and maintenance of those systems. And the slide that you can see here sort of sets out that initial structure that identifies, 6 full-time staff with seasonals. I'm sorry, 5 full-time staff with seasonals that would help us with that operations and maintenance of the parks. So that general upkeep of the parks, those would be supplemented with some of the contractual agreements that we have with landscape contractors and janitorial services, and would allow us to take care of those parks. And this structure here would allow us to do some of the minimal programming that we thought we would need to capture the need for that additional programming services. We're working with a consultant to help us go through that. And I've got a slide a little bit further that will go into a little bit more detail on what we're looking at there. Next slide. So with that structure in mind and the revenue streams that we were forecasting, so, we're looking at the parks levy that that all businesses and residents pay into the park district. It's about $1.3 million a year. We have some general funds that we've allocated since parks are a current goal of the city, that we looked at continuing to allocate for a period of time, some small revenues and some intergovernmental fees that we would get that would, roughly balance out to about 1.4 to 1.5 up to $1.6 million over that first 5 years. And during that time, it appears from our initial analysis that there's funding available for those services, for operations and maintenance services, and it would allow us to develop a small fund balance as well for that first 5 years. As I mentioned before, one of the gaps that we have is related to this recreation services programming and activities. NCPRD is certainly involved in a wide range of recreational activities. They also provide adult services at the Milwaukie Center. We have hired a consultant, Ballard and Associates they're actually out of Colorado, and they have a lot of they've had a lot of interactions with NCPRD and as well as Happy Valley when Happy Valley was leaving the district, and have a very good understanding of NCPRD's operations in terms of park services and adult services. So they're helping us go through this evaluation and analysis of those services to identify, what those basic amenities are that are being provided to the community, those services that members of the community take advantage of with NCPRD, and to help us identify what future operations and maintenance of the Milwaukie Center will look like, and those revenues and expenses associated with those. In addition to the Milwaukie Center, they're also looking at that broader range of recreational services that Milwaukie residents take advantage of, and helping us get a clear picture of what's involved there in terms of revenue and expenses. And then they'll be developing a set of recommendations for us to use. In addition to the recreational services analysis that we're doing, one of the other pieces it relates to our financial revenues that the city has. Currently, right now, new development pays what's called a system development charge to NCPRD. It's a pass-through through the city. And those charges are based on how development impacts the park services and tries to capture those impacts that development might have, or redevelopment or intensification of use on properties. Currently, there's a fee, a $3,900 fee that a single-family residential property, new property would pay into to NCPRD. So what we're trying to do with this piece of the analysis is we're going to go through an analysis to develop an interim SDC methodology and fee that we can charge to new development in the city as we transition from NCPRD to the city, that will allow us to have, to capture that revenue that development has. If we didn't do that, we would basically be sacrificing those SDCs and wouldn't be able to capture those dollars. We can use these funds on capital projects that the city might have it planned to do. And one of the things we're doing there is we've gone through with our consultant and have pulled the projects out of the NCPRD's current master plan that they've identified in 2014. And we've made some small additions there in terms of land acquisition and a skate park. And our consultant's going to be using those projects that I think total up to about $50 million to help us determine a new system development charge, interim development charge that we'll be able to use. And it's interim because, if the city and the residents decide that, hey, we should be leaving the district, we'll be going through a larger, robuster systems development plan with the city, an engagement process with the community to determine what the community's desires and needs are for our park system. But this interim SDC analysis and methodology will allow us to capture those revenues in the interim. I went through that pretty fast, I feel like. Are there any questions?
So we can go into more detail. Peter and I both have a lot of experience talking about SDCs or any of the technical parts of this. The discussions about the why or the how or the when would be up to council to answer. So for what I propose is that we actually turn over to Suzanne. Suzanne's over on the other side of the room. She is talking to people who are on the computer. I'd like to take those questions and comments first, just because it's really hard to go back and forth. So I'm going to see if there's anyone online who's interested in asking a question or making a comment, and we'll start there.
Just a second. We do have 7 people online. No one is.
Perfect. For people who are watching this either tonight or at a future night, and you're interested in getting more information or you'd like to log a comment about tonight, we're encouraging people to send an email to ocr@milwaukieoregon.gov. That way it gets into the record and you'll get a response back from me. Okay? Perfect. Then if there's no one online, let's go to the floor. We have a microphone right over to the right hand, well, your left hand side of the room. I'd ask people to speak into it just so we can capture it on air. But we're here to take questions or comments. Hi.
Hello. Thanks. Okay, so it looked like from your presentation, you went through kind of, hey, here's some stuff we'll gain by transitioning away from the North Clackamas group to having our own. But I guess a clear understanding of what we're going to lose would be good. And it sounded like, I mean, because we look at the idea of the park and maintenance aspect, and then it sounded like you just started looking at the other portion, which is the programming and services. And then there's still unclear as to how much money we'll have left then to do actual projects, you know, because that's what ends up happening. They'll end up gluing together additional funding and everything. So when do you think you'll be ready to actually be able to present, like, globally, like, this is what we currently have, what we get from them, and this is what we're going to be gaining, and this is what we're going to be losing? Because this kind of
I'm
thing.
going to let Peter answer most of that question. I
Okay.
do just want to put out, part of why things changed is we are in discussions with NCPRD. So when you're sitting in a room, people will add things to the table and they'll take things away from the table. When we originally were talking, there was some interest in them retaining the recreation component and us partnering with NCPRD on the recreation component. The last time we spoke with them, they were less interested in that. That's why we started that component later in the process, is because it sounds like they would be more interested in us taking on full service if we were to leave. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Peter.
Thank you. So the recreation service analysis that we're doing, I'm actually should be getting some preliminary information back from the consultant next week. And I anticipate having a discussion with, Ann and, and the consultant on that analysis and, probably asking some questions. And then I anticipate having a further discussion probably with council in January on those recreational components, on what are those recommendations from the consultant there as it relates to those services, and what that provision of services might look like at that time. Similar to that with the SDC analysis, I will probably have that discussion with council in January as well. I think you asked a question about sort of the capital programming as well. So, much of our capital programming is funded through grants. So I anticipate that's still going to be the case for most of our larger capital projects. The 3 projects that we're in the midst of going through the engagement with the community and design, we are using $2.25 million in grant funding that we got from the state legislature, Representative Power and Senator Taylor last spring. So we're using those dollars to do that, supplemented with some Metro grant dollars that we also have. So we're using those grant dollars. There's a little bit of general fund going to those projects, but it's really sort of minimal. So most of our construction on capital projects are funded with grant dollars that we receive, and there's lots of opportunities to get that, and we're always looking for those opportunities. At some point in time, if the city did leave the district, there might be a levy for capital improvements that might be requested and as a ballot measure, but that's yet to be determined.
Yeah, any other
So
comments?
I guess the thing would be, it would be helpful to, I mean, there's usually the thing you want to make sure people understand, like, the benefits, which you guys did a great job outlining of it, but to kind of clearly outline what do we currently get from, the North Clackamas group versus what we would be getting doing it from our side, but what most likely there's going to be some limitations, there's going to be something that's not going to be the same covered or something like that, but sort of clearly outlining through it, because when you go through, I mean, I think most people would appreciate understanding just line item wise or, you know, graphic wise or something where you'd walk through as to what is changing with it.
We can totally have that conversation. A couple of things I can say definitively tonight. So most of the senior services at the Milwaukie Center are grant funded from federal dollars. We've already had conversations that those funds would transfer, and that we would also be taking staff, or at least a percentage of the staff with us to provide those services at that center. So that piece I can definitively say today. And that's if they decided they didn't want to provide the service, right? This is still a negotiation, but the senior center, the senior services should not be harmed. In terms of things like basketball or soccer programs or baseball programs, we work with a number of nonprofits. I don't know how many of you are parents in the room. I am, so I'm going to speak only from my personal experience in this. I work with Milwaukie baseball today, and I work with the softball program today. They struggle to find fields at times, and they struggle to find services at times. That's something we can support them on if the city is managing fields and is managing the systems. In terms of, we've had requests for years for yoga in the park. We've had requests, I mean, there's all sorts of opportunities. That's a community engagement process that we would need to go through to find out which services are actually the ones our community wants, and to make sure that we align those services. But if you have a specific service you want to ask about today, we can answer it.
What's that? Oh, no, I mean, the whole purpose of it was the idea of understanding what you'd even have in the budget to be able to cover that. Because once you start going in and you start cutting it up, you know, you said there is a little bit of a balance left over and everything, and it's like, are you double talking it, or are you going to have to be looking at other locations to get the funding, things along those lines? You talk about the capital projects, it's like, okay, yeah, that's the base cost, but who's going to be facilitating those contracts? What engineering is going to be covered? Because, you know, our city engineering is very taxed and limited. Who's going to be overseeing the construction stuff and everything else like that? It's just, you know, what flexibility are you actually going to have, and, you know, what pieces are you able to move around and everything?
No,
So
that's really fair.
That's what I mean is, you know, trying to walk through as to what flexibilities you'll actually have with it once you implement it, sorry.
Right, no, it's really fair, and some of that's why we've hired this firm. We are looking at the NCPRD budget. About 40% of the budget actually comes from interlocal agreement funding, so federal dollars, state dollars, or comes from fees that are associated with use. When we built the budget, you saw at the beginning that didn't actually include most of those funds because we weren't assuming we were providing those services. So some of this fund is coming outside of the dollars you looked at the beginning, because they would be funded through different sources, and already today are funded through different sources for NCPRD. But it's a great question. I wish I had more detail for you tonight.
Well,
I think.
what I was asking was maybe being able to have you guys go forward with presenting a more boiled down breakdown of not just what we're gaining, but, you know, how things are getting covered, how you plan them being covered and everything.
Sounds like
with the
January.
internet. So, okay.
No, it's a great question, and it sounds like January is when we're going to have more of that content. I'll go back and watch this tonight and just make sure that I captured the list of things you'd like to have included in there, and we'll make sure that we include them as a part of our presentation when we come to council.
And
I have other questions, but I'll wait.
if I could just add one more thing. So, you know, one of the things that our consultant is helping us do is helping us determine how do residents in Milwaukie use the services that NCPRD provides. So that's a hard question because it relies on the records that NCPRD keeps, and we've seen some gaps in that data in terms of how they manage how members of the district use those services, and how we can sort of differentiate between people that live in Milwaukie versus people that are outside of Milwaukie. And so we're trying to sort through that data to get a clear picture of what are the services that Milwaukie residents use the most, and that will help us sort of tailor our programs and perhaps in the future.
I'll let somebody else ask a question for a second for you.
Well, one thing that I've not heard anybody mention is the aquatic center. And I know I don't foresee Milwaukie ever raising enough money and wanting to maintain their own pool. That's my primary source of exercise. And I know just me personally, it will cost me 25% more to use the pool if Milwaukie pulls out. So I would like to hear a little discussion about that. It affects kids taking swimming lessons, people just going for fun, for parties there, just swim for themselves. It will cost everybody out of district more.
Do you want me to? I'm going to start this and then I'm going to hand it over to the council. So I'm a mom, as I mentioned at the beginning. I've done swim lessons at multiple pools in the region, and I will be at a pool tomorrow morning. I'll be at Mount Scott tomorrow morning with my child. Sorry, Siri, I'll try and speak up. You're welcome. So I understand that the pool is really an important amenity. When we started the district, it was an important amenity then. It's part of why the district was formed. What we are seeing is there is not enough service today. There's not enough pool space, there's not enough pool time, there's not enough swim lessons, there's not enough any of the things that people want to do in the pool right now. There's just not enough time. And so part of the discussion is whether or not the city would want to have a pool. There was a discussion about that, and I think that that's part of the master planning process. So when we talked about the special improvement, the system development charges, we actually did include a recreation center as a part of the cost that we are charging to developers for a portion of that service, knowing that pools are really important. So, yes, I think it's a fair statement that you made, and I think there are definitely reasons why that will be harder. Is there anything council would like to add?
Are you picking me up? Okay. We have heard from a lot of parents that, getting their kid into swim lessons is harder than getting a campsite at an Oregon campground in the summer, which is darn tough. You have to be there on a specific date and you have to log in. So I don't think we should overstate the degree to which NCPRD is really serving our community today. But the aquatic center is there as a place to have, free swim or a fun swim, even if it's not serving lessons. And it will still be there for Milwaukie residents for that. It will come at a higher cost, just like the people of Happy Valley have, had to pay a higher cost since they withdrew from NCPRD. They are exploring now building a community center with a pool, and I do think that is a conversation we would want to have as a community. I mean, there used to be a pool. Some of you who've been around for many years remember there was an outdoor pool on the grounds of the current Waldorf School. I remember when it was much bemoaned by people in the community that pool cost too much to keep up and was kind of bulldozed. But I think it is a conversation we should have as a community. Is it important enough to us to build that?
And the only thing I would add is, in addition to thinking about the current state of, well, if we leave the district, which will take several years, by the way, if we were to do that, it's not necessarily a static situation. Right now, you pay X amount of dollars to go use the pool. We know that NCPRD is struggling to maintain its services at the rate that they are currently receiving. I would anticipate that we're going to see something come from NCPRD that is some sort of levy increase or is some sort of cost increase for pool usage. So, and that is speculation on my part, but I guess I just want to encourage you to also think beyond the now into the future. We know that all of the pools in the area are oversubscribed. We know this is a problem. It is not likely, in my estimation, that it will continue to be the landscape you have right now. Happy Valley's just purchased land to build their pool. It's going to take them a few years. I think they're looking at 2027 before they'll finally have a facility. I think that NCPRD is going to have to figure out how to address the problems they have with the current pool, and they are lagging in maintenance in that facility big time. So there's a whole host of issues, around the pool that I think are unique, that I just don't want us to lose sight of as we think about that.
Other questions about the pool, or do we have another question? Yep.
Yeah, I just kind of want to build on that it's not just the pool, it's the summer camps, it's all of these things. And if we pull out of the district, we don't get that priority registration date. We don't get that discounted rate. And you guys are saying you're going to take the same money that we've been paying in CPRD and do more with it. But you're now standing up a whole other department, a whole another round of staff, and you're going to make us pay more for services with North Clackamas, which may take years for Milwaukee City to reach the same level that NCPRD is at right now. So while NCPRD is maybe not the greatest, they are providing a service, and it could take City of Milwaukee years to even reach that level. And I know it's this, great, yes, oh, we can do it, but there are a lot of little details that even the residents of Happy Valley specifically, I know quite a few, who were quite stunned at what they were suddenly handed. And then as their children were coming through and their parents were coming through and everyone was needing the recreational services, suddenly they didn't have them. And that, I think you guys are focusing so much on the positives that you aren't looking at all the details on what we will be losing if we switch. So it's not really a question, more of a statement, but I would really like for there to be an acknowledgement of the fact that we would be giving up a lot, and it would be a long time to reach that level again.
Counselors?
Thank you for that. And I hear your concern, and I don't want it to seem like we're painting over it. So that's good feedback, that you're getting that sense. I guess I would say that as I have been thinking about this, and I'm just speaking for me, not all of council here, I have been aware of the frustrations and challenges that we have faced, and I know that other people in the room who've served on the Parks and Recreation Board have faced in terms of accomplishing basic projects around our parks. So what you hear coming in terms of the positives is almost that, oh, we could do this. So you're right that we aren't as grounded in the day-to-day piece of it. When I say it would take us several years to leave the district, there would be a negotiation process. I probably shouldn't talk about this. This is something that Ann and Peter are better at talking about, but there would be a negotiation process. There would be a date at which services from NCPRD would end and ours would begin. So it's not so much a taper. I just want to highlight that. I think we would probably have some services in place. But part of the conversation we would be having up until that time would very much be, what do you want? What is important to you, Milwaukee? And us figuring out if and how we can provide something like camps. It may be that we would contract. It may be that there would be other ways for us to bring services online more quickly than you might anticipate. But again, that is speculation. That is stuff that we have not talked through with the consultant. We'll know more about that in January. But thank you. That is really helpful. And this is the piece that I think I personally need to know more about the most, because I am very familiar with how difficult it has been to do the work of just getting parks built. And I'm looking at 1,500 new units of housing coming in the next 3 years. And I'm really worried that we're going to have our ability to direct our system development charges to provide parks for those 1,500 new units of housing and their residents, because we know that NCPRD and the District Advisory Committee have been exploring the possibility of pooling our SDCs instead of requiring them to be spent where they are being generated. And that could very well result in new parks being built elsewhere. I'm all for new parks in other parts of the district. Don't get me wrong, this isn't an us versus them. But in this instance, where we have density really coming on rapidly, and we are already a parks deficient community in several ways, I have a lot of concerns about that. So that's where my attention has been directed, is more the big picture. And I think what we need to do in this conversation is figure out where, if there is a middle ground, or what the greatest needs are, and how we can meet them, and if we can meet them, by leaving the district. Does that help?
Just to add to what Council President Heisey said, we aren't there yet. We don't know if we are losing him or not. That's still, I'm assuming, from my understanding, it's not a foregone conclusion. There's a lot of negotiation, there's a lot of things, a lot of details that still need to be worked out, but it is a possibility. There's a possibility that we don't. So we're just not there yet. So I think that's why we don't want to jump to the conclusion and say what we are losing and what we're not losing in those services, because we just don't know quite yet. But we hear you on that one. We do hear the parents, we do hear the community, and how important those services are to all of you. We are keeping that in mind. And like Council President Heisey said, this is why we're here. So we appreciate it.
So I hear what you're saying, but none of that was captured in what was presented to us. And that's sort of the point that I'm trying to make, is that you're selling something, but you're not showing what you have, what the cost truly is. And so you guys are really trying to sell this, hey, we can do it on our own. But it feels like, the devil's in the details, and you guys haven't spent a lot of time looking at the details, and you're marching forward. And I understand you're having negotiations, but these are the things that need to be in the negotiations, and these are the things that need to be presented to the public so that they understand what their representatives, or however you want to term all of this process, how their wishes are being interpreted, because what I heard was not something that I would be too thrilled with. I understand that you guys are trying to move some money and focus on our area, which is great, but at the same point in time, there's a lot of services that could go away, and that needs to come from the community. So.
And I was remiss, can I actually have you state your name, just so that we can get it for the public record?
Deborah Corson.
Thank you, Deborah.
Well, I actually had a question for council. My name's Lisa Gagnon-Rinker, and it doesn't address the registration issues that you might have in following in the order that they do. But has the city given any thought? Because I'm hearing monetary concerns. Is there any possibility in the negotiation or discussion of this of supplementing some citizens who might have a gap in the monetary issue? Yeah.
We have had those discussions, and we're open to continuing those discussions. And we're also, I don't know how many of you know about our low-income utility bills or our utility rates. We actually have those conversations a lot. How do we actually make sure that we hold harmless those who are most in need? Yes, I guess is the short answer, but we still need to know which services are most important and what services people want us to make those deals for. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Lisa Lashbrook, and I know you all just figured this out, that NCPRD is not crazy about the idea of providing recreation services, but as a person who has served on the Recreation Committee for a really long time over there, I'm curious if you are planning on having another similar forum with more information on what that would look like, and anything else that you might learn along the way. No, just in general.
I just looked at people sort of nod over
I would
on
love
the
to,
side.
yeah.
So there you go.
I would hope that, yes, we do have another forum like this, especially, I think we have to at this point with the concerns that you all have brought up. It's needed, so we will, I'm sure. I mean,
In January or whenever we know more, yeah.
I would like to make a comment, one comment. So, you know, the recreation services piece, that is the one piece that makes me lose sleep at night thinking about that, to be honest, because there is, we recognize there's a lot there, and it does seem to be very opaque because of the way that, you know, NCPRD manages some of the information. So that's one of the reasons why we've hired a consultant to help us out and help us determine how we could best proceed if we did leave the district, and what would be what might be sacrificed or what might be gained by doing that. So, you know, that's the reason why we're working with a consultant to help us understand that.
Say, I am not a parent. I have not really used those services much, but I have watched. I do look. Well, I do look at the catalogs, and I do think, oh, I should be taking a Zumba class. I will say, I have certainly noticed that the offerings have gotten smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Over the 20 years I've lived here, the size and number of classes offered is just a fraction of what it was 20 years ago. So I just want to, put that comment out there. Also, I guess I'm not ready to give up on the fact that there may not be a deal to be struck with NCPRD on this. I mean, they lost, because those class offerings keep shrinking, it might be in their interest to reach a deal with us to keep more people in the district and keep more people contributing to that. We own the ball fields in North Clackamas Park. It seems like they probably want access to those ball fields. We own the Milwaukie Center where a lot of those classes happen. It seems like they might want access to that building. So it seems to me like we have some room for negotiation. As staff indicated, the latest indications from them are that they're not interested in that negotiation, but I guess I'm not ready to give up on that. I think we have some bargaining chips, and I think we shouldn't assume that we can't find a solution there.
Hi there, my name's Jacob Sherman. I'm an Ardenwald resident, and wanted to say thanks so much for having this forum and this conversation. I'm maybe a comment and a question. I think that a comment is I'm excited about this. I think this makes a lot of sense as I look around our community and see anything great that's happened in our parks. I know it's because of you guys and not Oregon City. And I think that's one of the things I'm also excited about with this is knowing people like Lisa Gunyon-Rinker have been doing plant sales for the better part of a decade to try and improve our parks. I want to be able to show up at City Hall and talk to city staff and talk to my elected officials about the improvements we could make in our community and not have to go talk to our Parks and Recreation Board and a district advisory committee and then drive to Oregon City to try and convince somebody who probably doesn't really care much about Milwaukie to make our own neighborhood better or our own community better. So I like that idea a lot. And I have questions too, and I think one of them is like even hearing, and as somebody who also has kids and knows that like for swimming lessons, you got to get on at 9 o'clock on the morning and cross your fingers and that you can get a thing. But that's the same everywhere in the region. You know, that's why I go to Selwood or Mount Scott for swimming lessons most of the time. I would just be curious if there was a way to also think about in our own recreation services, if that was something we decided we wanted to do, how we prioritize our own community over the other people that might want to flock to our pool or our baseball field or those kinds of things. I don't know if that's anything staff have talked about, but I'd be curious in hearing on that. Thanks.
I mean, NCPRD is able to determine the difference between in-district and out-of-district, so I can't imagine that we wouldn't be able to do something similar here. We have a number of tools that we use for, you know, figuring out, mostly it's utility bills. If you've got a utility bill in the city, then you're in, you know, you're in the special club, thank you. So I would hazard a guess that we could do that, and certainly we would want to prioritize that. It's something that's serving our community. Then yeah, that's the way it ought to be. I don't know. Does Ann or Peter, do you guys have any improvements on that?
No, I mean, we did, following the windstorms last year, we did the same thing with the utility bill. So if you brought in your utility bill, you had a free drop-off. If you didn't have a utility bill, you had to go to a commercial drop-off location.
And for people who live in apartments who may not have, you know, they may just pay a fee to as part of their rent or whatever, I'm sure we can figure something out for that.
Hey everyone, Joel Bergman. Quick, hopefully clarifying question with regards to the Milwaukie Community Center, and kind of along the lines of the last question here as far as prioritization. As the city is looking to maybe take over management and operations of programming, but more important and interesting to me is social services and senior services, will all current district residents that take advantage and rely on those services still be prioritized even under the city's guidance? And if not, I'm sure this is all part of negotiations, will there be kind of a safety net to catch those people? Because I know there's a lot of people interested in that particular part of this conversation. So anything you can add would be great.
So the federal grants would require us to provide service to people who qualify for the services. It doesn't stop at a boundary, and my guess is that's your answer is yes, we would continue to provide those services. Just so people in the room know what those are generally things like Meals on Wheels is probably the biggest, most well-known one. But yes, we have amazing volunteers, and I say we because my family does it. So it's a great service, and it's one that we will continue to provide. How that all comes through the negotiations, I don't know. I don't know if, you know, there are, I think, 11 different locations in Clackamas County providing Meals on Wheels services to different parts of the community. And they receive grant funding, and then there's a relationship back to the Human Services Department. Honestly, I've always been a little surprised that NCPRD was managing a human services system, because that's really what it was for a very long time. But we'll continue those conversations, and you'll know when I know. But it is something that we care a lot about.
My name is Pam Husband, and this is just kind of a practical question. How many parks are there in the city of Milwaukie? And when you talk about maintenance, besides mowing, what does that involve?
Do you want to go for it?
I don't have that number on the top of my head. 16. Yeah. So in terms of operations and maintenance, what else does that include? So besides the mowing, so that would include, you know, the general repairs and on equipment that's out there, you know, graffiti removal, weed eating, you said mowing, garbage pickup, janitorial services that might exist if there's a restroom out there. Arborist, yeah, tree care, shrubbery care, those other landscaping services that we provide. There are, maybe some during the winter times going out there and making sure sidewalks and paths are cleared from any snow or ice that might be on there. Yeah, so things of that nature.
For deferred maintenance, things that we've seen on deferred maintenance, the S-clips on the swings get bent, and they can be dangerous. You gotta keep a watch on them, you have to remove them and change them out. The slip tape on the playground equipment can get really worn out, so it rains a lot here, having little kids running up and down the stairs, they need non-slip tape. That has to be regularly replaced. You've got the wood chips underneath the playground equipment. That actually has been an issue for the last several years. They did just replace that, but it was woefully inadequate for the trip and fall hazards for kids. So you can get really hurt, as my daughter did when she broke her wrist. So it's really important just to keep all of those things maintained so that kids can have a really fun adventure, or adults can have a really fun adventure without getting hurt. Thank you.
David Aschenbrenner, Home Avenue. So is it totally off the table or not a possibility to restructure the North Clackamas governance so that it is more fair and equal to all the communities and it's not overseen by one general board of directors? Something like districts, membership, district representatives that sit on a board to run that. Or is that totally off the table?
So there are two different bodies, right? There's the county commissioners that are the really decision-making body, and restructuring that would take a vote of the people. They put that out to a vote in 2014, and it failed. It passed in Milwaukie, actually, but it failed in the rest of the district. Then they have their district advisory committee, which is 2 people, is 5 areas, Milwaukie, 1 of, and 4 from outside, that are roughly 20,000 people per area, and each have 2 reps. So that was an attempt to create some representation, equal representation on that district advisory committee. I would urge you, those of you who know Wilda Parks, to chat with her about the process of creating that committee. Commissioner Savas, who was referred to earlier, who's the only commissioner who lives in the district, and because of that, the rest of the county commissioners kind of defer to him. What's the best word for it? He massaged that process so that it fit his goals. He massaged the selection process so that he got in who he wanted to get in. And I'm going to get real political right here. He was just reelected, unfortunately. It looks like he was just reelected. So he's not going anywhere. And I am very pessimistic. I will tell you that I am very pessimistic about our continued relationship in the district. I think we have some interesting conversations to have as a community about, what we lose in the recreation sphere and if we stay, what we lose in getting our parks built. They have built, in the last decade, they built Wichita Park, with some help from the neighborhood and building that, but they built Wichita Park. We've built, we're building 3. We've built phase 2 of Milwaukie Bay Park. I personally don't see us getting Milwaukie Bay Park built for years if we stay in the district. And I really think This community has worked on that for 25 years. The city started buying property in the 90s along Milwaukie Bay, accreting together parcels, demolishing buildings, doing all the groundwork to build that park, built Phase 1, which is the Klein Point, a donation from the Klein family, then built Phase 2, which is what we see today, the big lawn and the boat ramp, built largely with state grants, but also with our Kellogg Good Neighbor Committee money. The stalling and the gamesmanship over funding Milwaukie Bay Park has been going on for 3 years. It started pre-COVID. That park, until a month ago, I will tell you, NCPRD's own website said they were going to start building in 2020. They only just recently finally upgraded their website to remove that. That gamesmanship has been going on, and I mean, I think that is a really important asset for the city, for all of us to use, but also for the development of our downtown. It's a very timely project because we might actually also have a path ahead to remove the Kellogg Dam. And to get the Kellogg Dam removed and Milwaukie Bay Park built in the next 5-6 years would be a game changer. It would be an amazing thing.
So as a follow-up, you're saying that the council is not willing to consider trying to push the change of the Board of Commission / governing body. You tried it in 24, it didn't fly, that was several years.
NCPRD tried it in 2014.
Right, but there's no thought about trying to change that, make that.
How we would initiate that process.
I don't know either, I'm just asking, because if the problem is the main body that's making the decisions down in Oregon City, that it seems like there would be a lot of people that would look at this and go, is this really representation?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question, but my sense, and we don't have Justin here, our city attorney, so, but I don't know how we as Milwaukie or as Milwaukee City Council would initiate that process, given my understanding of the district and the district's formation.
Okay. You haven't heard anything from any of the other members of the district or any of the other regions of that district that they're not happy with the Board of County Commissioners?
There's plenty of dissatisfaction all around. The part of the way this has become politicized, and I'm sure Councilor Beatty's words have kind of alluded to this already, is that there's, on the District Advisory Committee, which Councilor Nicodemus sits on as our elected representative there, there's several other community members. He has seen this real us versus them mentality that's sort of trying to be, that certain parties encourage, where the unincorporated areas look at Milwaukie and go, well, Milwaukie gets parks built, why don't we have parks? And that's a good question, because they should have parks built. I would love to see, there's some great properties or opportunities that are not, that don't get built. So I'm glad they're asking that question. The challenge is that often gets funneled into being mad at Milwaukie because we do get our parks built. What's invisible in that conversation is the millions of dollars and the hundreds of hours of staff time that the city puts into making that possible. So it's not the us versus them narrative that can serve so well for redirecting attention from the Board of County Commissioners and whether or not they are doing their job in serving the unincorporated areas of NCPRD. So if you can get around that whole narrative, yes, you will find plenty of residents in the unincorporated areas of the Parks District who are frustrated with their current level of service and with the situation they have in their parks. The problem is who's telling the story and how it's being controlled. So it's, I mean, I think that is certainly a thing that would be really potentially a nice solution. I just don't know how we, as our body, can get there.
I do think, I mean, it was alluded to in Peter's presentation about system development charges, but I do think those are an important thing not to lose sight of. We are on a bubble of a lot of development in Milwaukee and a lot of system development charges coming in from new apartment complexes. And to lose control of that, to not be able to know that those will be used to build parks in Milwaukee is really troublesome. And again, it's something we're still negotiating. It's not clear where it's going to go, but there's definitely an interest on some in the county on diverting funds from Milwaukee to build the Concord School. The Concord School is a great project. I hope it gets built. I think it'll be a great community asset for people in unincorporated and in Milwaukee. But it is a $30 million plus project. It's 3 times the cost of Milwaukee Bay Park. And it's something the county, frankly, just as we built Milwaukee Bay Park in phases, the county probably needs to either do the Concord project in phases or put it out to voters for a bond. You know, a bond. We put out this building, this beautiful building here, to Milwaukee voters and said, do you want a new library? And they voted, yes, we want a new library. Well, if NCPRD wants to fund the Concord School, maybe the county needs to put that out for a bond measure to fund the Concord School and not be sucking everything out of elsewhere in the district to build that pet project.
Lisa Gagnon-Rinker from Ardenwald neighborhood. And to kind of ask the question about that, so I know with Milwaukee Bay Park, the price of money that I guess the Clackamas County Commissioners is roughly $3 million to put into the project. That was part of our money that we've paid through property taxes for years. Is that part of that? 3 million, or what is the 3
Part
million?
of their contribution was actually Metro Green Space money.
Metro Green
It wasn't
Space money?
even NCPRD funds.
So our SDC dollars that come only from the new development, how much as a city, from a taxpayer perspective, I guess, would we potentially be losing going out of our city area where the density and development is happening if it does go elsewhere in the district? Do we know $1 million?
It was
What's the total of SDCs?
for the 5 years, it would be $5.2 million.
That we would lose?
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Other questions?
Stefan Lashbrook. First a question and then a comment. How long has the tax rate for the county been set at 54 cents?
34 years. 34 years.
That's part of the problem.
Yep.
And what's Tualatin Valley's tax rate by comparison?
I think it was $2.25.
Right,
Yeah.
you see the difference there. I want to go back to Councilor Beatty's earlier comment about dealing with the county government and just point out, and this is, I'll freely admit, this is why I'm no longer a leader in city government, because I'm quick to make decisions sometimes, and I'm glad I heard a lot of what was said here. Sometimes I'm too quick to make decisions. But one thing I know for sure is that in any partnership, you have to be able to trust your partner. And they have proven themselves to not be trustworthy. And that, to me, says it all. And whatever we have to do to fix the problem for us and be able to trust one another in doing so, that's what we've got to do.
Other questions or comments? So I'm going to reiterate, just because we are getting close to time, and I know people would love to have some time not here. I'm going to stand here. I'll be over in a corner if you want to come talk to me. If you're uncomfortable having a group conversation, you're welcome to grab me. I'm sure other council members would be happy to do the same. So we're going to discontinue this part of the evening. We're going to close it out, but we will stay, and if you want to have direct conversations with any of us, we're happy to answer. The other piece I just want to make sure we capture on for the record and for people watching. If you have questions, you can send an email to ocr@milwaukieoregon.gov, and I will write back to you. So I will work with Peter and the team to make sure you get a response. All questions are important right now, and they're making us better too, just to think through this. So I appreciate everyone's comments. Anything counselors want to say to close us out?
Thank you so much for coming.